Mr. Speaker, I think it's important to note why we have those per-country caps. Ours is a nation of immigrants. Except for those descended from Native Americans, every one of us is an immigrant or the descendant of an immigrant. The American people are drawn from every country on this earth, and from these disparate and diverse populations, we have created one great nation, the American nation. Here, there is only one race, the American race. This remarkable achievement is made possible by a single word: assimilation. Our immigration laws were written specifically to accommodate that process. They were written to assure that as immigrants come to our country, they bring with them a sincere desire to become Americans, to raise their children as Americans, to acquire a common language, a common culture, and a common appreciation of American principles. That is the only possible way to blend so many discordant, disparate, and diverse populations into a common people devoted to the same principles that have produced the happiest, most just, most prosperous, most free, most advanced, and most envied civilization in the history of mankind. But assimilation is hard. As Winston Churchill said from that very rostrum, we have not journeyed all this way across the centuries, across the oceans, across the mountains, across the prairies, because we are made of sugar candy. Becoming an American requires learning a new language, accepting and adopting new customs, adapting to a new culture, and accepting new beliefs. Assimilation breaks down if the concentration of immigrants from any single country reaches a level where assimilation is no longer necessary for that population. Instead of e pluribus unum, from many nations, one great nation, from many people, one great people, we instead see e unum pluribus, from one nation, many isolated, insular, and segregated communities that become foreign enclaves rather than an integral part of our national identity. We have all heard the heartbreaking tales of American workers not only being displaced by foreign workers, but being forced to train their replacements as a condition of severance pay. This bill assures a never-ending supply of foreign labor for American corporations. Under this bill, any alien on an employment-based green card waiting list for more than 2 years could apply for adjustment of that status. Once an alien's filed an adjustment of status application, he or she is eligible for a work permit. However, unlike an employment-based green card, which generally requires a showing that the wages and conditions of Americans are not adversely affected, this work permit is considered an open market employment authorization document, meaning the alien can take any job at any wage and there are no protections for American workers. So this bill essentially converts temporary visa holders to permanent status at the expense of American tech workers. This rewards the very same companies who for years have fired their American workers only to replace them with cheaper foreign labor. American workers, particularly Black and Hispanic Americans, are going to be particularly hard hit. Pew Research estimates that each group only accounts for about 9% of the STEM workforce, and this measure assures that competition for those positions will become much greater and the wages much lower. The per-country caps exist to assure that the population of no single nation can come to dominate the overall immigrant population coming to these shores. Thus, under current law, immigrants from one nation cannot claim more than 7% of the visas, but under this bill, the employment-based limit is eliminated. If this is allowed to happen, assimilation breaks down, and the entire foundation of a nation of immigrants is shattered. As I said earlier, the practical effect of this bill is that the population of only 2 countries, China and India, will almost exclusively dominate the receipt of employment-based green cards for the foreseeable future at the expense of the people of virtually every other country in the world. Instead of an equitable distribution of green cards across all countries, they will in effect be limited to 2. In one employment-based green card category, EB-5, all the green cards will go to Chinese nationals for several years. In another category, EB-4, religious workers will be precluded from getting green cards. Instead, these will go to alien juveniles from Northern Triangle countries who've crossed our border illegally. This imbalance would undermine the fundamental mechanism of assimilation And I fear that's the point. Assimilation has become a dirty word to the left. They seek not unity, not one united people, but rather a people divided into warring racial and ethnic factions, divided by language, culture, race, ethnicity, and ultimately grievances. No nation can survive very long tearing itself apart this way. The collapse of our southern border and the refusal of the Democrats to defend the sovereignty of our nation from the unprecedented illegal mass migration that they've unleashed will spell the end of this nation if it's allowed to continue much longer. This bill is a small part of that policy, and it is destructive in its effect, if not its intent. I yield back the balance of my time.